the standards, municipal planning standards, some guidance documents, some background information, and a survey. So the survey, we'd really like you to fill out and return it to us at the end of this. That would be very helpful. The restrooms are out the door to the right. I think he's still cleaning those. So there's also some restrooms all the way down the hall on your left. And there's refreshments and Wi-Fi. What's the Wi-Fi? If you need it, but you should be paying attention so you won't need the Wi-Fi. Yeah, so anyway, thanks for coming. Chris and I had gone to a couple of different regional planning commissions presentations and they weren't very well attended, so I didn't put out a lot of chairs, so I'm really impressed. Thank you very much for coming. This is our third, I think, relating to energy planning. So this might be familiar to some of you, or it might be brand new. Either way, feel free to ask questions throughout, and there are some break points in here specifically for questions. So we're talking tonight about an overview. I'm going to do the easy part. I'm going to talk about the basics of energy planning in Vermont and reviewing the municipal planning standards. And Chris is going to get into the nitty-gritty of some of the things that your town should have received some data from us and some mapping. So Chris will kind of go over some of that too. And this is not the place for discussing statewide energy policy, because that's a whole can of worms that, you know, the regional planning commissions, just like you as private citizens, can't, you know, is out of our purview tonight. So while it's very interesting, we're not going to really talk about it. Although there is a little fact sheet about net metering, the new net metering rules, just something I typed up that helped me put that in perspective. Using my notes. So the state of Vermont thought that energy planning is important for various reasons, mostly environmental reasons, climate change, the use of fossil fuels. They want to decrease the use of fossil fuels. Also for economic reasons, because a lot of the fossil fuels that we used here in Vermont, we're spending our money and it's going out of state. So we're hoping to keep some more of that money in state, also retaining more jobs in the renewable energy sector and weatherization programs. So environmental reasons, economic reasons, and also for energy security reasons, because the prices of fossil fuels fluctuate, supplies kind of fluctuate as well. So for all of these reasons, Vermont felt it was important to plan, important for energy planning. And they started back in 2011 with a statewide comprehensive energy plan, and was driven mostly by a desire to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So they came up in statute for a 75% reduction from 1990 baselines by 2050. So we're supposed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in the state of Vermont 75% by 2050. And other goals were to reduce total energy consumption per person by 1/3 by 2050, and also meet 25% of the remaining energy needs from renewables. And the big target that most of us are familiar with is 90% by 2050. And there's also renewable end-use sector goals for transportation, buildings, and electricity. So for electrical and end-use sector goals by 2025, there's 76% is the goal. And the comprehensive energy plan was also updated in 2016. The state also had other energy planning guidelines and efforts, including a siting policy commission that Governor Shumlin formed in 2013, and a solar siting task force. And with the note that they realized that energy planning is not just a standalone thing. It's also intertwined with all the other planning that towns and regions do in terms of transportation and land use, housing, natural resources, and also economic development. So they all play a part in how we use energy. Also, there was an Act 56 that was recently passed, and that is for screening for renewable energy projects, mostly solar, and it allows for municipalities to have a bylaw for screening planning purposes, but those screening requirements as a bylaw in your municipality can't preclude the building of a renewable energy facility. I mean, you can't have your screening requirements so restrictive that it's impossible to actually have a solar farm. And they can't be any more restrictive than any other commercial development screening requirement. So that's really policy, and I wasn't really going to talk about that.
Questions or different?
Sure, yeah.
I was wondering, can a town implement a moratorium until they get their document written, their energy policy written? So that we're not inundated with a bunch of projects that we're not ready to handle properly?
Right. I don't think so, because you'd be under the guidelines of the current policies that are in place.
Yeah.
So you could not say, no wind right now. It would still be follow the same regulatory process that's in place. Yeah.
In which case we have no say.
Right. Well,
I
look.
mean, it's the same. Right.
Okay. So in 2015, the Department of Public Service engaged 3 initial regional planning commissions, which was Two Rivers, Bennington County, and Northwest, to take the comprehensive energy plan from the state down to a regional level. So they wanted all of the 3 initial regional planning commissions to set regional targets for energy conservation, generation, and fuel switching strategies, and to develop specific strategies for conservation, energy efficiency, and reducing fossil fuel use. And also to produce some maps that would show where renewable energy resources were available in the region. So our plan, we've had several drafts, and our plan is scheduled to be voted on at the Two Rivers annual meeting in June. And once that's approved, it will be sent to the Department of Public Service, and hopefully they will say it's great, and we will get the certification of energy compliance, and then we will be able to look at and certify town plans that go through the Act 174 process.
Will the municipalities have a review and consent process before you okay your plan?
Well, we've had public hearings, and we're having the final public hearing, having one May 31st at our regional board meeting, and that will be held in Woodstock on May 31st. So there's opportunities, and you can, it's all on our website, so you can see the current draft, and you can comment. You can submit comments to us at any time, and they'll, be reviewed and considered. So anytime you can do that. So the other regional planning commissions that weren't part of these 3 initial ones are going through the draft process now. They have a draft by the end of this month that's due, and then their final drafts are due in December. So all of the regional planning commissions are going through this process right now. Does anybody have any questions, further questions so far?
Hey, the way that you presented that made it sound like for any of our towns to have their town plans or energy plans put forward, that the regional plan has to be approved by the state.
No, that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
That's kind of the preferred method, but if a town is gung-ho, ready to go right now, they can submit a plan directly to the Department of Public Service for review. But they're hoping that they go through us.
The 3 regional planning commissions are pilots for the rest of the planning commissions in the state?
They were initially, but now all of the 11 regional planning commissions are going through the same process.
With the same timeline?
A different timeline, but yes. So ours, Bennington County has actually submitted theirs already, their final plan to the state, and are just waiting to hear whether it's been approved. And like I said, ours will be going through at the end of June to the state. Linda?
How much time do you think it takes for the regional plans to be reviewed and approved?
I think they said 2 months is what they're, a month and 2 months, I think is what they were giving for
2
themselves
months,
to go through everything.
And they've already had a good look at ours initially, and so their initial comments on our first round drafts have been incorporated. So I don't think it'll be a laborious process because they're already well familiar with what we've done so far.
And approval is from the Department of Public Service as opposed to the board?
Right. Yes.
So does the Two Rivers plan, does that have parts that the towns need to implement that you oversee?
Well, that's coming up. So
Okay.
yeah, hopefully I'll answer these questions in just a minute. Hi.
And just one more. Hi, I'm Mike.
Yes.
Just to make sure I understood that, if the regional plan is approved, then instead of working directly with the Department of Public Service, we, the towns, can work with the regional
Right.
commission.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Did you have another question? I'm sorry.
I was just wondering what the time frame of the plan itself is, and will it be renewed?
That's a good question. Yes, it will be required to be renewed, especially if state laws change and they'll be updated. It probably won't be as rigorous as the initial plans that we're putting forward now. And also, subsequent versions of comprehensive energy plans are going to take this planning process into consideration and kind of model the comprehensive energy plan so it's more compatible with regional and municipal planning processes on energy. Because the initial comprehensive energy plans weren't thinking in that regard, so it'll be more compatible and easier for subsequent upgrades or updates to regional and municipal energy plans. So then Act 74 came along, and it's effective of January 1 of 2017, and that establishes an optional municipal and regional energy planning standards. So this is completely optional for municipalities. If you just want to keep your same energy chapter in your municipal plan, that is fine. You don't have to go through this enhanced energy planning, but if you want to receive greater standing in the Section 248 proceedings with renewable energy systems, then you should go through this process. And it's a good exercise because it gets towns thinking of how we use energy across the different sectors. Yes. So communities that meet the standards go through the checklist that was one of your handouts, and it's also available on the Department of Public Service website. Then you'll receive this determination of energy compliance, and that means you get substantial deference, which is has been defined now in statute. So right now, towns just have due consideration in the Section 248 planning process, and that term due consideration was never defined by the Supreme Court of Vermont. So it's kind of up for interpretation, and it's really difficult for towns to plan to that because they don't really know what due consideration means. But now substantial deference has been defined, and if your if your energy plan passes muster and gets this certification of energy compliance, then it's likely that the Department of Public Service will take what's in those plans unless they have a clear and convincing demonstration that the general good of the state outweighs what's in your plan. So should be very helpful. And it's yet to be tested, so we can't give you an example of how it worked because we don't know yet.
So did Act 174 change at all the requirement for the public service boards review and approval of these projects? I mean, before they just rubber stamp them and say, certificate of public good, go forward even when towns sued them and tried to stop a project. They just had priority for these projects. Does any of that change?
Well, I think Act 174 came about because of the criticisms from towns that felt like they went through a lot of planning efforts and they weren't being heard when renewable energy systems came forward or cell towers. So I think, the act was in response to that and but they want to make sure that towns are actually doing their due diligence as well and not giving a blanket statement, we don't want wind or we don't want solar. And they want a thoughtful demonstration of how energy planning works and a thoughtful understanding that we have these big goals in the state of Vermont to use renewable energy, and it's up to all of us to make sure that we can make those goals. So hopefully they will, the substantial deference will help towns with their planning be more effective, and the Public Service Department will take.
Yeah, I see that we all, you, the regional commission and the towns all have to put in a lot of work
Right.
to meet these requirements, but I
Right.
don't see that the Public Service Board has to do anything to make us feel good that they're actually.
Well, now this is a definition that lawyers will be working with, and and developers will take a look at that and say, we've done some very thorough deliberative planning, and we've identified places in our town where we think renewable energy systems should go and where they shouldn't go for the following reasons. And unless there's a clear demonstration that the good of the state is different than that, then the department should take that, say, okay, well, we agree, the town specifically says solar farm should go here and, not there. So. Yes, any questions? And again, it hasn't been tested yet, so.
Yeah.
Yes, Pete.
Will any of this have any effect whatsoever on, say, a fracked gas pipeline? Because it doesn't seem like the Department of Public Service is paying much attention to the 90% renewable by 2050 in terms of giving gas pipelines the okay to build out. So if a town has an energy plan like this, and does it only cover renewables? Can we talk about where we do or don't want pipelines?
Right, that's a very good question.
I haven't seen anything around that. I believe, the act itself was essentially written as a siting bill, and that was their main focus on the siting for the bill. But I haven't seen
Was
anything
it
around.
citing for just renewables, or was it citing?
I believe it
for
was
other-
mostly
Yeah.
focused on siting for renewables, not on kind of everything else.
And unfortunately, neither Chris or I are experts in Section 248. So if anybody knows what the coverage is as far as non-renewable generation systems, please.
Well, it's still 248.
Yes, yeah, so,
Although I might looking back to one of the previous slides, one of the goals is develop specific strategies for reduced fossil fuel use.
right.
But what I noticed in the fracked gas pipeline and the Addison County pipeline, it doesn't seem like the Public Service Board is, Department of Public Service, is held to the 90% renewable goal in 2050. They seem to be just approving pipelines as if that doesn't impact that goal. So that's why I'm.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I will try to get a good answer, and I have your email, so I will just send out an email and see if that'd be helpful.
In the same general area, has any consideration been given to the manufacture of wood pellets as a non-carbon based, a non-fossil fuel that is renewable?
Yes. We do have, like, in our regional energy plan, we do have more of an emphasis on biomass, including wood-based products, and that's one of the standards that one of the checklists that you look at. So towns and the region are looking at more biomass use. It's a good question. Where am I? Okay. Right, so the checklist, which, you got as a handout, and it's also available on the department's website. That's what they'll be used to go through. That's what the regional planning commissions will use to review any town plans that come forward. And that's a similar one for regional planning is what the department is using to evaluate ours. So it's basically a checklist. And it's very similar to the process for just your regular municipal plan. Very similar. But they're looking at your whole municipal plan to make sure there's no contradictions between like land use and transportation and energy. So if you have, for example, this is the example they gave us, policies in an energy element that support a land use pattern of densely populated villages and downtowns surrounded by dispersed development countryside would be inconsistent with the policies in the land use element that called for 1 acre density in rural areas. So you have to make sure that all the elements in your regional plan are consistent and try to help reduce energy use. So to go through this process, you'll have to have a locally adopted municipal plan and then a regionally adopted municipal plan. And you'll go through the checklist, and that includes analysis and targets of a baseline of what your energy consumption is now, and the targets of 2050 or 2025, 2035, and 2050. And then you will go through and identify pathways, like what you're going to do to reach those targets. And then there will be a mapping exercises which will tell you, identify what resources are available where. Yes.
So the energy plan is a standalone document as opposed to part of the municipal plan?
It can be either. So if it's a standalone document, it has to be referenced in your municipal plan, or it can be,
But if we make any changes to our municipal plan, we have to get it readopted.
right,
So,
yes.
so if we're going to make reference to an energy plan that's a standalone document, it's going to have to be readopted.
Right, that document would be adopted, that extra document would be adopted by reference with the
Right,
municipal plan.
Yeah,
but my point is that if we just readopted our municipal plan, any change that we make means we have to readopt it.
correct, yes. And, you don't have to stick to the 8-year time frame. Any town can make changes to their plans at any time, but yes, you have to go through that whole process. So currently, Two Rivers is working with 3 and now 4 towns through this enhanced energy planning. So we're working right now with Bethel, Braintree, and Randolph, and we just got word that we had additional funding, and then we're going to be working with Woodstock. These draft plans are going to be submitted to the state by July 31st, and with the new state budget, we're expecting 3 years more of funding so that we'll be able to work with more towns in our region. And so initially, we'd sent out a letter to every town saying, are you interested in enhanced energy planning? If you are, let us know. And I think we got positive responses from 11 of our 30 towns. So we'll have additional funding in the next few years to work with more towns. And when these initial 4 towns' plans come up, we will offer them as a template. So even if you don't get one-on-one planning work with Two Rivers, I think these templates will be very handy for energy committees and planning commissions to work on their own and develop their own plans. And we'll be sending out a letter shortly to that effect to all the other towns that were interested in this, but we're waiting for the budget to actually pass. So I think that is all for my part, and then Chris gets into the nitty-gritty, but we'll be here to answer questions.
So a lot of the next few slides are a breakdown of the standards that Dee was talking about that were set by the Public Service Department, and the kind of the various sub-requirements that are required in that checklist. It is also important to note that the standards were, I believe they were released to us in January, February. So it was kind of written after the 3 pilot RPCs finished a majority of the text of their regional energy plan. So our energy plans kind of help shape those standards. And in the standards, I think everybody grabbed at the front. The first 2 sections are kind of just general applicant information stuff. And then the other 3 sections are the analysis and target section, the pathways and implementation sections, and then the mapping exercise as well. So this is kind of one of the biggest changes from the traditional regional energy chapter to this new version. In the standards that are specific to Act 174, if a town chooses to do an enhanced energy plan, they have to do a sector analysis now along electric, thermal, and transportation sectors. There's guidance on the DPS website on how to address those components as well that we use and towns can also use for the development of their plans. Let's see. And it's also through one of the contracts that we had with the Public Service Department, all those targets and current use data has been provided to all 30 towns in our region, which is what I mailed out to the Planning Commission chairs and then I think emailed to Energy Committee chairs and Two Rivers Board representatives. And all that information for the towns was a combination of a kind of a top-down approach of data and also a bottom-up approach. There were some difficulties with some of the data, which we'll go over a little bit later. So in the analysis and target section, one of the things the towns have to address is kind of estimates for current energy use across those 3 sectors that we talked about. And then they also have to establish targets for thermal and electric efficiency improvements, such as heat pumps or use of renewable energy for transportation, heating, and electricity. Municipalities must accommodate all generation technology types, but not all scales of technology. A town can't say that they don't want any wind at all throughout the town, but they can say no wind in this area because of the scenic viewshed, and then give a list of rationale as to why that scenic viewshed is important to the town. And then also the town needs to evaluate the needs, evaluating the amount of thermal sector, conservation and efficiency, and conversion to alternative heating needed to achieve targets. They also need to evaluate transportation changes needed to achieve targets. So a target would be that a town needs to have a certain number of EV cars, and that need would be that the transportation sector in a town would need to be using 90% renewable energy by 2050. So as I said earlier, all this information was given to the towns a couple weeks ago. It's on the respective town page website on the Two Rivers website. And for towns doing an enhanced energy plan, to meet the standards, they can either use the data that we provided a couple weeks ago, or they can collect and analyze the data themselves, as long as you follow that guidance that the Department of Public Service has on their website.
If there's like a specific section in here that we think we can get better, more accurate.
Exactly, we definitely encourage you, exactly.
The whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'll go over a little bit some of the difficulties that we had in kind of that data, just because we were doing 30 towns.
Right.
Was there a question over there?
Yeah, I have a question about who this American Community Service survey is, because you've got your existing energy usage from them, and I wonder why you use that rather than GMP?
So that was one of the kind of the errors that we had. So Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, which did a lot of the modeling for our plan, they also were working with all the utility companies throughout the state to get that data. And the problem is that data is available by zip code, and zip codes don't necessarily match up with the town boundaries.
Right.
So VEIC and the utility companies are working together on a methodology to come up with exact numbers for the towns for that reason. And I think they're supposed to get that to us at the beginning of June. So then from there, we'll kind of update that document and pass it along to everyone
It'll
else.
be updated.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
If we were going to try to get our own data, would we have to establish its accuracy or validity?
Yeah, exactly. You have to establish that and kind of the methodology that was used in collecting that data.
How would one do that?
So for example, I guess if a town wanted to look at like the number of homes that were
Weatherized.
what?
Weatherized.
Right, that were weatherized, a survey that the Planning Commission or Energy Committee sent out to that town would probably be a more accurate number than the number that we had.
How did you come up with the numbers on all those surveys for what kinds of energy?
Yep, so we'll actually go over that a little bit later when we use one of the example town templates and kind of walk through that. Oh, and if a town does use the RPC data sheet that we sent out, they're presumed to kind of have met that analysis and targets standard. Any questions on the analysis and target section? I think we went over most of those. So one of the three major components in the new standards are these implementation actions. Enhanced energy plans are expected to include pathways and recommendations to achieve the targets identified through the analysis and target sections previously. The state uses the term pathways and uses the terms pathways, but that's really kind of just your goals, policies, and recommendations in kind of a standard municipal plan. The idea of this pathway section is to come up with a way to address where the town is today and where the town needs to be in terms of renewable energy by 2050. Plans are to include or at least address all of the pathways that are in that checklist. For example, one of the questions in the checklist is that, does the plan promote a shift away from gas or diesel vehicles to electric or other non-fossil fuel transportation options through strategies appropriate to the municipality? So one way that a town could meet that standard is a policy that's encouraging EV infrastructure at our workplaces or key public areas. So then kind of further going through that step, the actual policy would be promote existing EV charging infrastructure in town, for example, by including a map on the town website. The standards do recognize that some... Yep.
I'm sorry. How far into the future can you look to come up with these plans? I mean, self-driving electric cars would be something that would change everything for transportation. And it could be that people didn't actually have to own a car, they would just be picked up and taken to work.
Mm-hmm.
But how can we put that into our plan if it doesn't exist yet?
So in terms of the kind of the pathways, a lot of the numbers that are helping support that information, the model includes a lot of various technological advancements that I don't know the full list of it that they did, but through that modeling process, they included a lot of those things. I don't know specifically if they addressed that in there, but that's definitely how the advancements in technology were addressed.
Thank you.
Yep. The standards do recognize that not all the actions are applicable or equally relevant to all of the towns. Communities can indicate that a pathway is not applicable as long as they give reasonable justification in the plan. So an example would be kind of rural, it would be public transit in kind of some of our more rural towns like Corinth and Berkshire. So the plan must contain a statement of policy on the conservation and efficient use of energy and include actions that implement that statement either by encouraging conservation, promoting efficient buildings, promoting decreased use of fossil fuels, or improving efficiency of municipal buildings. Another standard in there is that the plans must contain a statement of policy on reducing transportation, energy demand, and single occupancy vehicle use and encouraging the use of renewable or lower emission energy sources for transportation. There's further kind of sub-checklists that towns also have to go through. Standard number 8 on the checklist, the plans must contain a statement of policy on patterns and densities of land use likely to result in conservation of energy. So that includes policies that demonstrate a commitment to reducing sprawl and minimizing low density and prioritizing development in compact mixed-use centers where physically feasible. And I think one of the most important standards is the 9th one, which is containing a statement policy of the development and siting of renewable energy sources. So that's going through and evaluating generation or looking at the current generation in town, analyzing the generation potential through the data exercises, identifying sufficient land in the municipality for renewable energy development, including statements also that accompany the policy, or including statements of policy that accompany the map. So for if you're identifying some of those unsuitable areas, what are those policies that help back up the decisions that were made in the mapping exercise? Let's see. Any questions on policy and implementation? Yep.
I'm not sure if you know about this or not. We've been working on a solar project in town for a couple of years.
And this is in Deptford?
Yeah. And we didn't want this whole process to slow it down, but it hadn't yet gotten approved by the end of last year. So apparently in the rules, there was something that allows that if the town, select board, planning commission, and regional planning commission sign off on designating a site as a preferred site, you can move forward with that as a preferred site before this all takes place. Is that true as far as, you know?
I think we've seen just like one or two of those example instances come through. And I'm not sure that we know actually the results of that, but I have seen it with Thetford, and there's one other town that did a similar thing. So I think that's true, yeah.
And that kind of addresses that earlier question, I think, about kind of what do you do in the interim
Right,
for the plans.
right. It's because I know it's, with the new net metering laws, it makes developers not able to finance it if it's not a preferred location.
Right. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the whole
It's all
thing.
drawn to a close without
Right.
that.
Right.
I mean, if you all come across that language in the rules or whatever that allow
I'll
us how to
forward
do
that
that,
too.
if you could send that, I'd love it, because I'd love to share it with other towns, and know if it's possible. Because it sounds like this could be a process that takes a while to go through this whole thing, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So the mapping component is a required component of the enhanced energy plans. The municipalities may use the maps that were provided by the RPC to meet the standards in the sections, but obviously that doesn't include a lot of the local decisions that the town's going to make. So from there, they can either choose to undertake their own mapping if the town has those resources, or work with RPC through the different funding sources that Dee talked about earlier. So originally, in the early stages of this process, we were looking at a megawatt target, and the target set, or we were originally looking at megawatt targets. Through the process, RPC has kind of worked with the Public Service Department to change that to a megawatt hour target, which provides for a greater diversity of sources to achieve energy targets based on the resources capacity factors. So for example, a 10 megawatt solar farm would have a megawatt hour generation of about 12,000 megawatt hours. And that's just through a simple formula of the number of hours in a year times the capacity factor of whatever renewable source you're choosing. The 5 maps that we made for the region and each of the towns are the solar, wind, and hydro, which you see here, and then we also did include on this slide biomass, and then current existing generation for the different types, as well as a map layer of all the transmission lines, 3-phase power, and substations. And that was all provided in that mailing from last week and also online. And through the mapping exercises, we started with the raw potential for certain types of power production based on the qualities of the landscape. So for solar, that's based on the topography, the slope, and other qualities. And then for wind, that was given to us from the state on wind speed that was analyzed at 3 hub heights of 30, 50, and 70 meters. The maps for solar and wind do not take into account whether lands are forested or not. And for hydro, the data was based on a community report from, I believe, 2010 that kind of analyzed the feasibility of upgrading existing dams.
And do your maps really take into account also the utility infrastructure?
So that isn't on the map, but that is one of the constraints, is what the grid can handle in certain areas. And in the regional energy implementation plan, there is a graphic that does kind of show a general area of where the load can handle that, and where right now it probably needs some infrastructure upgrades. And really, for a lot of the towns, if a town doesn't have three-phase power, as we kind of get to that point where a lot of houses either have solar panels in their yard or whatever, a lot of those towns will need, or the utility companies will need to upgrade their infrastructure to kind of meet those goals.
I know GMP does have a map that shows that very thing.
Yep, no, and that's exactly
the
what
same layer that you
That's the
have.
same layer, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So are the utilities in the future looking at making, what is termed a smart grid? Will we need that changed to accommodate all of this this extra energy from solar and wind and hydro? Is that something we need to be concerned about on our planning level?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can get back to you on that one.
I don't think that at the municipal level, you need to be concerned about that. And even, at the regional level, the regional planning commissions and the towns aren't actually the ones that are developing these
Right.
systems. We are just making it allowable in our plan. We're saying that, yes, we're going to plan for it, but we're not actually the ones that are developing it. So, and again, in terms of state policy and the New England grid, that's kind of out of our purview. So while it's very important, it's something that we can't control, and so you don't need to worry about it. Just plan like it would work. Yep, that was the advice we were given.
I have a question about the hydro, because of course the White River is the only undammed major tributary to the Connecticut River, and they always said they would never put a dam on it.
Yep.
And so, have you worked with the Agency of Natural Resources? And
So in the plan, we don't put any policy recommendations to build any new dams. It's essentially using technological upgrades in the current dams that do
current
have.
dams that are holding back a pond full of mud because they've been there for 40 years?
Right, exactly. So from that raw layer that I just spoke about, there are constraints that may or may not limit the feasibility of developing renewable energy generation. It's important to remember that the maps are designed to identify areas that are feasible for projects based on various factors, but they're not actually saying that a project is going to be built in this area. So let's see, we will start with the unsuitable areas. These are areas that are poor locations for most forms of development due to their natural or scenic value, as well as protection from potential natural disasters. In the regional plan, we identify those unsuitable areas as floodways, Class 1 wetlands, and national wilderness areas, as well as areas that are identified in a duly adopted municipal plan. So again, I'll use that example. If a town has a designated view shed and they said that was an unsuitable area, that would be one of those sections. Constraints on the map include some of the areas that may impact the siting of renewable energy generation facilities, but do not necessarily preclude their development. These include areas such as source protection areas, deer wintering areas, habitat blocks, prime ag soils, etc. These areas are identified as locations with the potential on the map, but are colored differently to identify that they have a possible constraint that might have an impact on the development potential. And on the maps, these are shown as orange, and once we go into one of the town examples, you'll see what that looks like. Additional areas with no constraints were supplied by the Department of Public Service, and those are not shown on the map on a layer as orange, but they are presumed to be unsuitable. The Energy Implementation Plan text intentionally does not distinguish between known or possible constraints, as both areas might be feasible for development, but we have to take a look at it on a case-by-case basis. So from the unsuitable layer to the constraint, the towns can also set preferred locations. So these are specific areas where you want a generator or a specific size or type of generator. So those towns can come up with their own list, and also in addition must use the statewide statutorily preferred areas, which are rooftops, parking lots, brownfields, previously developed sites, gravel pits, quarries, and Superfund sites. And then also on the map, there's a green layer, which are the prime areas, and those are the areas that have raw potential and that are not identified as unsuitable or have any of the constraints that were listed. Yeah.
Are you getting any similar plans from the utilities?
Could you elaborate?
Well, yes, in our town, we don't have three-phase.
Right.
Trying to site locations would be interesting in terms of the variables you're talking about, but until such time comes that we can understand the plans of the utility companies or our inputs into the plans, it's a waste of time. So I'm concerned about trying to make plans that are dependent on somebody else who's not a part of this process.
Right, yeah. And I think that's kind of beyond the purview of the Regional Planning Commission. That's kind of either working with your state legislature to kind of connect with the utility companies and kind of force them to be open to the community.
As long as I understand that, and you know.
Yep. Yep. Let's see. Also important to mention for the unsuitable areas, land use policy is applicable to other forms of development in this area would also similarly prohibit other types of development. So for example, if you have a medium density area with commercial uses, you can't say, commercial uses in there, you can't say that the town is okay with a medium-sized business there, but not a medium-sized solar field. You can regulate the scale of that solar field, but you can't say that in a medium-sized district, no medium-sized renewable energy generation. I think a good example of that is if you're going on Route 4 west towards Rutland, right by, I think there's a McDonald's right on Route 4 before you make a left onto Route 7. There's a solar field behind the McDonald's, and then there's also a solar field behind Rutland High School. So if a town said that they didn't want any commercial energy generation in that area, that would also prohibit all of those businesses along Route 4 in that area. Did somebody have a hand up?
Suppose we designate all suitable areas as preferred in the interest of promoting solar. What would happen at the state? Has anybody tried that?
Don't believe so. I think that would be, yeah, most towns are kind of going through the list and kind of focusing more on where they don't want it. I haven't seen an example of a town kind of saying, kind of put it anywhere.
That's a good question. We're trying to make a note of questions, and then if we
Thank you.
get some answers, we'll share them.
Also in the unsuitable areas that any regional or local constraints must be supported through data or studies that are consistent with the remainder of the plan and do not include any arbitrary prohibition or interference with the intended function of any renewable resource. Any other mapping questions? So now we'll kind of go into an example from one of the towns in the region and kind of go over those different sections that we talked about. So that first link there at the top, the regional energy plan, if you go on, let's see if it loads. That's not helpful. So if you go onto the Two Rivers website, it has, on the top part, our regional energy implementation plan, and then it has right here a link to all the town data packets that I sent out. And then if you go further, It has all the guidance and links to the Public Service Department's website. And then we also wanted to include there we go. So we also wanted to include a map that everybody can use online, and that if you can search, I can't see it. If you search here, you can search any town in a region, and I will zoom out and show you what that looks like. So that will have all the constraint layers, the prime layers, and prime layers within 1 mile of three-phase. And we also wanted to include parcel boundaries. Just give it does take a little bit to load just because there's a lot of data, but we wanted to throw in the parcel boundaries so people can start looking at their towns on an interactive level.
So you can turn on.
Right, you can exactly turn on and turn off all those layers. And what's really nice is there was also the, let's see if I can see it here. So if you turn on and off the constraints known and constraints possible, that actually kind of shows you how we got from the raw layer to the prime layer.
You have source protection areas?
I don't believe that was on there. Let's see.
Is that included in the constraints known, or is it just not on the map?
And yeah, if that was, let's see, if that one is in the constraints known, then that would be kind of a, we haven't been able to put it on the online map, kind of a subset of all the different components that make those known and possible. But it kind of just helps give a general idea.
And you can type in a specific address in that search bar, and it'll zoom in to that specific address.
Yeah, and if you go to that view larger map link right there, that just brings you to a full screen version so you can easily see everything. So now we'll go into one of the towns. So if you go onto the Two Rivers website and just go to member towns, you can click on whatever town. So I'm going to do Bethel tonight because that's one of the towns that we're working on. Eventually there will be a separate section that will address, we'll have a separate energy section, but right now they're just under the other projects and maps, and they're under the energy planning packet. Oh, it's not showing up there, is it? There you go. So if you click on that link, it brings you to the packet that we mailed out. It kind of has a general explanation of a lot of the data sources and where those came from. And then it gets into all the data that is required in that analysis and target section. So we have current municipal energy use. A lot of this was used from data from that ACS website as well as VTrans and certain assumptions in terms of number of miles driven per person in a town. The standards also require that you do current municipal residential heating. And this is also when we do re-update the document, we noticed that there was a typo in this section. That's not supposed to say municipal square footage heated, because that would be a lot of square footage in a town. It's just supposed to be this same column header, just as the full number, and then the next column has the simplified number. And then the same exercise for current municipal commercial energy use. And then 1D is that other number that we have to update once we get the data from Vermont Energy Investment Incorporated. And then so as we go along, the targets are, these targets are all the same for each of the towns. These are all the same for each of the towns, and let's see. And then some of the ones that are more individual are this one, which are number of wood systems and number of heat pumps or number of EV cars. Those ones are based on the actual number of cars in the town or current heat systems. And you can see on here there is a there it is labeled as 0. That was because there was, due to the LEAP modeling that VEIC did, they were forecasting a really large decrease in wood use in our region, but in our plan we wanted to really emphasize the wood use because there's a lot of biomass in the region that could be used. So we couldn't put any numbers because we didn't have a good methodology to put numbers, but we just made sure to say that towns should look into encouraging changing into efficient wood heat systems.
So do they get the information on residential heating from the listers?
So that was, and I think that would be a good instance of where if a town wanted to do more accurate data, they would have to go to the listers for that information. That one, I believe, was,
I think it's census data.
right, that one was probably census data. So that does have a little bit of a larger margin of error. Also because of that modeling, there was also another little weird number. We obviously don't want to encourage a decrease in electricity efficiency targets, but we just have to put that number there because that's what the data told us. And that I spoke with somebody at VIC who did the modeling, and she was telling me that that was because of the efficiency trends that they were forecasting were going to outpace the electrification of a lot of things like heat pumps in homes. So that's why that number showed up as negative.
Chris, may I ask, so where are you getting the heat pump data?
So that was using the modeling numbers from LEAP and ACS data. There's also that I sent out with the towns, there's a large spreadsheet that kind of shows the inputs into each of these numbers as well.
Is there any place where there's an accurate definition of what efficiency means? Because you're talking about electricity, which runs a vast number of different types of devices and heating systems and so forth. And all of them have different standards. They change over time. And I question the validity of anything that attempt to name an efficiency number.
Did you have a...
I'm writing these questions down. I think, the data and inputs and everything, there's lots of variables that go into it. And I think the emphasis is not really on individual data points. It should be on a trend to make sure that we are decreasing our energy use, and what energy use we can't decrease with conservation and efficiency, we're going to have to use renewable energy. So I encourage people not to get caught up in the details of the data and just really focus on the big picture of how towns can work towards the 90 by 50 goals. Because yes, there's some problems with the data, and we'll look at a better definition for efficiency and what that relates to in each of the different sectors. So that's a good question.
When we talk about efficiency, is it better to think about it as energy consumption per capita as opposed to how efficient a TV is? Is that what you mean?
Right.
That's what my question basically amounts to, sure.
What are you defining as?
I mean, we could increase electrical use hugely, but it's being used more efficiently by putting some kind of a factory in, for instance, that's got better equipment to manufacture widgets, and so it's more efficient, but we're using a lot more energy, so.
Right. Yeah, and with the LEAP modeling that went in through digested all this data, they built in some efficiency and improvements in, better appliances and more efficient use of heat pumps and et cetera. So some of that was built into the model.
Yeah, because I think the real goal should be reduction in the per capita energy consumption, and efficiency becomes like a Trojan horse there. It is misleading.
Well, you're right, and really all it's trying to say is you're getting more out for what you put in. That's,
But that's what I'm questioning. You can't do that.
Well, I disagree. I mean, it's like using a dryer to dry your clothes using the sun.
Yeah, well, that's
I know it's terrible.
That's energy consumption.
I know it's different.
We're talking about the efficiency of the dryer.
And the better comparison is like using a heat pump to heat instead of electricity.
And that one
So-
example, you can do it. but
Yeah.
Efficiency is,
Well, yeah, okay, that's fair. It's fair.
I gotta confess that I have gotten distracted by the data. There's sort of, seems like two big philosophies in our conversation so far. One was called the town putting, or a town putting together a plan that meets certain criteria so that you can have, whatever the language is, consideration. What's the term?
Substantial deference.
Substantial deference, right. So we started there, and as you said, that was almost kind of structured, or has been talked about from the point of view of limits a town might want to place on development of renewables. The town might want to have more say in where, and doesn't want it some places. Now, it seems like with these targets, we're sort of shifting gears to a different idea, which is how do we as towns promote, or how do we as towns try to reduce the consumption of, as a municipality and as individual, members of the town, and make better choices about how we use the energy to do the things we need to do. Those seem to be two, I don't want to say incompatible ideas, but almost different. They start from they're different ways of thinking. One's sort of an aesthetic, or what do we want in terms of our town to feel like. Another is just sort of how do we survive on a limited budget? Are we? Am I missing something, or are there kind of two separate ideas mixed together in one big plan?
I think when the state was thinking about how we can plan regionally and by town to meet the comprehensive energy goals, they were looking at all the different sectors: transportation, heating, and electricity. But how are we going to meet those goals? Well, we're going to have more renewables. And then there was a lot of questions and concerns about siting. So, so we kind of got lost in the weeds. But the overall plan is conservation and more efficient use of energy. Sorry, I'm using efficient. Better use of energy, reduction in the use of energy. And to do that, and also to meet the state's renewable energy goals, we have to be able to site it in our region, in our town. So it's not necessarily incompatible, but they want it all under a big planning umbrella. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I would say, I think the answer to your question is you're right to point out these two different tracks, but the whole point of this process is to get towns to think about both of them. I think that's the way.
Right, because towns kind of some towns haven't been thinking about that before, and this is kind of a brand new kind of way of thinking, I think, for a lot of towns.
And the other thing, I think in looking at some of that lead modeling is we have to remember that our electric usage is going to, the amount of electricity we consume is going to actually go up because we're going to be replacing that with renewable. And so when we're talking about electrical efficiency, we have to remember that we're actually not probably going to see that number go down at all. It will go up, but we're going to be replacing it with something that's non-fossil fuel. So it's just kind of remembering that these are all connected in different ways, and you have to look at it differently.
Thank you.
Is that correct?
Perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any thought going into these plans about how much we're using hydro with that? And because they are still building out their facility, planning to sell more and more to the U.S., and that's methane production. Where they do those developments. And so we can buy more hydro for that to meet our needs, but since it's hydro, and we're saying no more hydro, we're sort of skirting some plan.
And the purchasing of hydro, that seems to be more of a kind of state level policy decision in regards to the renewable energy credits. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I know that the state is planning on using Hydro-Quebec for power for the foreseeable future. So they're not going to rely solely on in-state production of electricity. It's kind of impossible. So they are still planning on the use of out-of-state sources of electricity, but they're hoping that we can generate more in-state. But we'll never get rid of it, unfortunately, in the foreseeable future.
Any other questions? So I will go down. So one of the biggest numbers out of this analysis and targets spreadsheet is right here, the 1L, use of renewables, electricity. So that's the target number for the towns in terms of renewable energy generation. So this number here, we decided to do a range because some towns were going to really excel and surpass the kind of hard target that was set. So we want to make sure to give a range for all of our towns. And that number was established from, there was a total statewide megawatt hour target of 5 million megawatt hours. Then that was divided into all of the regions, all of the RPCs based on population. And then for existing megawatt hour generations, the state then added together all of the existing renewable energy generation in that region, and then from there kind of subtracted that number out. So it didn't give credit to a specific town for current renewable energy generation directly, but it kind of pooled all of that number together for the region, and then we redivided all of that new kind of target number that was given to us based on population for each of the towns.
And I have a general question about how people in one town who have paid for, say, solar, a community solar that's located in another town. But so the individual residents of one town are the owners and they're the beneficiaries, and they're the investors in solar, but the actual solar generation facility is not located on their property. So is there been discussion about how to give people or towns credit for that or not?
So in regards to the targets that are up there, so I know, for example, there's I think it's like a 20 megawatt solar farm that's proposed in East Randolph. So essentially, if that project comes to fruition, and because the act was focused on siting, it's that whatever that megawatt hour number is would go towards the town of Randolph, whether other people bought into it or not. So it's essentially where the actual project is sited. I don't think they addressed the community solar aspect in the future. Yeah.
I just am going to say again, I've said it at every one of these meetings I've attended, that it's not fair to Sharon that we've already put in several megawatts of solar, and we're not going to get credit for it because it's being spread out through the Comfort, where several Two Rivers officers live, have solar. So,
But am I not hearing you say that if you want to, as Sharon, go and say, discount that part of the thing that says what you're generating now is on the regional average, and say, no, that's not right, we're generating this much and I can prove it because we're doing this much, that you can do that, right?
I think for that specific number, that might be the one section where there isn't that flexibility, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
We've gone round and round with this question.
So that's a geographical question, I think. And the other question I would have is a time-based question, is that if there was a pre-existing solar generation in your area, there's some point in time, if it happened before that, it does not count.
So that date is, the state set that date is June 1st of 2015. Right. So anything...
And that is something I think that we ought to have a political action committee to
really, because we did the whole Solarize thing, we did huge amounts.
Yeah, so that date is anything that was either built or permitted by that June 1st, 2015 date.
That's an arbitrarily silly thing to do with people who are early adopters.
Really? That hurts all of us who
It
did,
hurts the people who are proactive.
yeah.
And people
What's
look
the
at
reason?
towns that aren't.
Who do we cry to on that one?
Concord,
Yep.
State legislature, I think that would be.
It's still a statewide goal. We have to get so many 5 million
Right, 5
megawatt
million.
hours, right? Yes, so even those towns that were very proactive, and even like Hartford, who has the Wilder Dam, that's our biggest renewable energy generator in our region, and that's been in existence for forever, 40 years, I don't even know how long. So it's not that they're not getting credit for it, it's just that we have these goals that have been identified and set, so we all have to work together to make those goals.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but you see, the argument would be that if somebody's already got, let's say, 10% of their town occupied with solar, farms, then they got to start again in order to keep up with the requirements here. So now they end up with 20%. Some other town didn't want to do anything, and has to put to 10%. So you see, I understand what you're saying. I don't want to argue with you because it's not your policy. It's a bad policy because it does, no matter how you slice it or dice it, it hurts the early adopters. And that's something that I think the regional planning commissions at the other end of your job would be talking to the state and make a strong case that that's just not the right way to do things. I've thought about this a lot, and it really is a terrible thing to do.
Speaking of terrible things to do.
Well, would they have to count
I
the
think giving
weatherization
credit-
that goes way back?
Where the renewable
Yeah.
energy credits have gone is a bad thing to do. If the credits didn't stay in the town, why would you get credit for solar?
Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of brings up another point that I've been waiting for the right time to mention it. And it has to do with substantial deference, which I think none of us are really that familiar with yet, and I've only really read it for the first time here. But what jumps out at me is that maybe this is our chance to be able to say that we don't want projects if that energy is not counted towards our state, towards our town. And I don't know what your feelings are to if that kind of language is going to be acceptable, if those kinds of ideas. We want solar here for here.
Right.
We don't want it for, people in Boston that
Right.
live in an apartment.
Right. And I think that's something that we're going to have to wait and see until.
And what's really interesting about the language is that the town's land conservation measure policy is applied unless other factors affecting the good of the state outweigh that policy. But one could argue that the good of the state is not being affected if those credits are going out of state. So how, it just seems like we're kind of inside of the definition, and it's not really clear how that affects, because really I read it as that if those credits are going out of state, then you can't do the project, buddy, sorry, because it's not affecting the good of the state.
Right.
But I just wanted to bring up the point that I think this might be where maybe it's our opportunity to say that.
And I think a town can put a policy in their plan kind of to that point. And we unfortunately have to wait and see until that gets challenged and through the legal process so we can to set a precedent.
But again, I don't think the town can preclude that. They can say, we would prefer if the renewable energy credits stay in the state, but you can't say, we will not accept any renewable energy generation if you sell the RECs out of state. And I think it might be in the guidance some language to that effect, so one of the packets.
But I think we should at least point out that once you then go down to the unless, and it's not affecting the good of the state, that you've now, you're out.
You get the rubber stamp.
So there's some further target numbers on electric vehicles and fuel switching targets that are on there. And another number that I just wanted to point out was the renewable generation potential. So these numbers here are based on the acreage of potential renewable energy type with the constraints layer. So that's going to be kind of the largest layer So that's why the numbers, in Bethel, it's saying there's a potential for 2 million megawatt hours. That's obviously not all going to get developed, but that's what could happen if all the constrained areas were good to develop renewable energy generation. Okay, and then we can move to the.
Can you maximize that window?
So what'd you say?
Can you maximize that window?
Oh, yeah, sure, sorry. That helps us. So there is the existing energy generation map, and that has the transmission lines and three-phase power. I know it's hard to see on the map, it's easier when you have it printed out and kind of looking at it. This has all of the forested areas within town, and then I believe it also has the conserved lands as well on there. All of this is based on that hydro community report that I mentioned earlier. And kind of the big ones now are the solar and the wind. So on this map, all of the kind of blue areas are the raw solar potential based on those different criteria. And then all of the orange areas are all of the constraint areas. And then the kind of, oops.
The green is prime, I think.
Right, the dark green is the light green is prime, so there's no constraints there, and then the dark green is the prime within 1 mile of three-phase. So that's gonna kind of be your best spots for solar. And then that's the same for the wind potential map as well.
Okay. Sorry, what was the light blue, this RAW solar?
Yeah, that's the raw solar. So that's kind of essentially where the sun is shining, where, south facing,
Okay.
not too steep, those kind of factors. So that's the end of the maps, I think. Does anybody have any questions on any of the maps? Yeah.
I just wanted to say, before you had indicated that the general solar did not take into effect whether it was forested or not.
Correct. So that's something that when we are working with towns, we can put that layer on for you to kind of look at that and kind of help make decisions on what areas are preferred or unsuitable based on, if there's a certain forest or something that the town wants to protect.
So you had produced these maps as PDFs for the towns. Can we go back to the one that's on your website for searchable for the property boundaries and get that same information?
Right, so if you go back to that first one on the website that was a little bit more interactive, that will have all those layers. You won't be able to break up, like if you wanted to move one of the items that's on the list of constraints and you wanted to move that into an unsuitable because the town thought you really didn't want to develop there, that's something we would have to go in kind of further.
But we can actually get more detailed information on what is on these maps.
Right, through that interactive map, yep. I think that covered all of those. I think that was it for the presentation. Are there any other final questions?
I have a very general one, because when you start looking at the pathways, as an energy committee member, it makes you feel like, whoa, this will really get everybody going, and they'll have all these plans and stuff like that. But I need you could give a little backgrounding as to what's the difference between like a town plan and implementing the town plan, and how as planners you observe the difference between the two, like making the plan and who carries it out, That's the very broad philosophical question I want to answer.
So I think that, with the town plans, there's, I think a good town plan includes those actors for those different action items that the town has. So you kind of realize, when you're going through that planning process, you're really working to identify who's going to take care of this action item, this one, and that one. I think when the town plan is kind of going for review, there is a process that just initiated, I think last year, of the kind of going over those implementation actions, and when an RPC is reviewing the town plan, they have to look and see if, did a town actually do this action item or not? So that's kind of where the state has gone so far on that process. They haven't actually gone to, if a town hasn't done those action items, what are the repercussions from there? But I think that was a good first step in terms of trying to hold the towns accountable to some of those action items. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
I think the plan is supposed to facilitate business development. And that's how it gets in. People invest.
Although a lot of the action relates to trying to get individual homeowners to take action. So that's the kind of stuff the energy committees have been spending a lot of time trying to get people to do. But it's hard. And it's like, and just having it be in the town plan is not going to make it happen.
No, I was just saying, so speaking as, Woodstock Planning Commission, I'm also on our energy committee too, but we have a lot of actions that we don't have anybody assigned to do them, so they're not going to get done. However, when we have projects that come to town and people are saying, we want to do this kind of development or we want to do that kind of a project, we can go back to our town plan and look at it and say, does this fit with our town plan? So it's not really, it's more for the community to have identified the direction that they want to be going in. And then this document becomes a reference material so that if, Act 250 is really important. We've had several cases that come before Act 250 and they look at your town plan and they say, does it work? And it's good for that reason, as opposed to a lot of times any specific projects, happening more, some of us are much more reactive and proactive, I guess is what I'm saying.
To an energy committee member, not a town planner or planning commission, this looks pretty daunting. And so I'm wanting to know a couple things. So if we are eager to do it, and as soon as we can, but we're going to need some hand-holding, and I guess our planning commission is lacking a bit of energy right now, and would love us to help carry this forward as much as we can. Can you give us a sense of timing of when we might expect to be able to get some help from you and how long that process would take?
So, to the first point, it's when the budget does get passed, because there is language already in there set for funding to help municipalities in the future years for the energy process. In terms of timeline, we want to help them help the town as much as possible. I think that, there's certain requirements based on some of those contracts that we kind of have to have some sort of finished product, but the town can kind of continue with that. And for the 3 towns that we worked with this year, I believe we started in January, and then we have to have a draft by July. So that was a 7-month process, at least in terms of going through that process. But they can still work on that even further after we.
And they can keep all of that updated on the website. So like we're working with Bethel and Braintree and Randolph, and we'll make sure that those drafts are posted so you can go on there whenever you'd like and see how those towns are addressing this. And the slide, the don't panic slide was, the information that Chris gave to all the towns, that information, that data will meet those criteria. Now, if you want to go over and above and do your own data research, you can do that. But even if you just use that data right now, that would, check the boxes off for those 2 different parts of the plan. So it's a big head start. And then the individual implementation stuff, that's, town specific. So is your town going to help promote public transit? Is your town going to help, promote weatherization, that kind of thing? But a lot of that, I think once we get these initial 3 or 4 towns done, you can certainly use that as a model. And those drafts, like I said, first draft is due by the end of July. So we'll make those available.
I'm both on the planning commission and the energy committee, and I just want to know if this is two separate jobs, because we're told we need to have an energy chapter in the planning commission document. And this is a separate document, or will they both serve the same purpose and we only need to
So
do
you could
one?
include all this language in your regular energy chapter, I guess.
Well, you're saying I can.